What a disaster. The Giants have lost 10 of 12. They didn't win a single game on their homestand, and they have fallen to under 500 for the first time all year. They're 6 games out of a playoff spot, and they're looking like sellers, and they just traded Tyler Rogers. Disaster.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and RotoGraphs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show for almost 6.5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And coming up on today's show, we're going to get into the fact that the Giants traded Tyler Rogers to the Mets today and how it's a strong return, why they did it, why I do think it makes some sense, even if they're not full-blown sellers at the deadline, which is tomorrow. We'll get into the return. We'll get into Tyler Rogers, and we'll also get into what's next after the Giants have this disastrous homestand. They do not win a game. They get swept by the Pirates and the Mets. They're 2-12 in their last 14. Just nightmare stuff. So all of that coming up. Just a reminder, if you haven't heard, I am in my last few days as the host of this show. If you want to continue to follow me, please do at Ben Kaspick on Twitter. That's BenKaspick. So Friday is my last day here. Anyway, we're going to jump right in to the fact that the Giants traded Tyler Rogers today to the New York Mets, a contender. In fact, the team that the Giants are going to face next is who they traded Tyler Rogers to. So starting on Friday, they're facing the Mets, and they're going to probably see Tyler Rogers once or twice in that series. And that's crazy because we've seen it so many times with other players, other teams facing Tyler. It's just hard to not imagine him on the Giants. And like the first reaction I have, like whatever the return is that it's sad to see Tyler Rogers go, because to me, he was just really, really an easy guy to root for. And he was so steady, so consistent, so humble, and ho-hum, go about your business, and yet was like deadly on the mound, even though he throws his fastball like 82 miles an hour. And so let's see. Shohei Ohtani got yanked from his start in the middle of an at-bat. Interesting. Okay, sorry, I'm checking Twitter because I was trying to find my note about Tyler Rogers just to get these numbers right. Tyler Rogers has a career 2.79 ERA. He's never been on the injured list. He has an MLB high 379 innings and 375 games since the start of the 2020 season, which was his first quote-unquote full season. It was, the COVID season, but he was on the Major League roster the whole time. He wasn't on the Major League roster all of 2019, so that's why we're not counting that. So anyway, he goes to the Mets in exchange for right-handed pitcher José Buttó, right-handed pitcher Blade Tidwell, and outfielder Drew Gilbert. And so we're going to get into this return for the Giants after we say, thank you and so long to Tyler Rogers. I do just want to mention the logistics, which are that Tyler Rogers, I kind of like was dwelling on this a little after yesterday's episode, if you listened, which my point was like they should trade Camilo Doval and also buy, because Doval has trade value. Like I still think that could happen, and we will get into that too. But one of the points that I wish that I had made is that you could also trade someone like Tyler Rogers. And the reason that it makes sense to trade a Tyler Rogers is because he's entering free agency at the end of the year. So you could always re-sign him. Like maybe he really wants to be here. You trade him away, you get these players back, and then if you want to bring him back, you could make him a strong offer to come back next year. And so we've seen that happen. It happened with Chapman that one year when he got traded to the Cubs from the Yankees, and then he went back to the Yankees. I think that was the scenario. But yeah, it's just hard to see him go, but I do wish him nothing but the best in New York. He's such an underrated reliever, because he doesn't throw hard, doesn't blow people away. But yeah, I mean, the Mets just made 3 significant major bullpen moves, and Tyler Rogers is definitely one of them, even though the stuff doesn't wow you, certainly. I mean, it wows me because he's got like a rising slider. But anyway, the Giants clubhouse spoke about the loss or trade of Tyler Rogers. Matt Chapman said, quote, "We kind of did it to ourselves. It sucks." Logan Webb said, "I don't blame Buster for doing something like that." And Shayna Rubin, who tweeted that, said, "Clubhouse is hopeful this isn't the start of a full sale, but also realistic. They'll head to New York 6 games out of a playoff spot. And by the time they play their next game, the trade deadline will have passed. It'll be like 24 hours in the rearview mirror." And so, like I said, it is kind of a disaster given they really were trying to win, and they did have a good record for so much of this season, hovering around 10 games over 500. But this stretch, 2-12, and also just overall, not that you pinpointed on this, but when they acquired Rafi Devers, they've just not been good ever since, and he hasn't been very good, and certainly doesn't look like the impact bat that they're obviously hoping that he'll be. So I do, of course, want to get into what the Giants got in exchange for Tyler Rogers. Like I said, pitching prospect Blade Tidwell, outfield prospect Drew Gilbert, and right-handed reliever José Buttó. Now, it's weird. The Giants say the pronunciation is Buttó, but there's an accent over the O at the end, which makes me think it's José Buttó. So whatever. If the Giants say it's Buttó, then we'll go with that. But the accent says otherwise. Anyway, the consensus in the industry is that the Giants got a good return here for Tyler Rogers. And the reason for that is that he's good. He's better than people think. So a lot of reliever deals went down like after this happened. Yeah, so Jeff Passan says the Mets paid a very hefty is what he says, price for Tyler Rogers. Right-hander José Buttó, outfield prospect Drew Gilbert, and right-handed pitching prospect Blade Tidwell are headed to San Francisco, a source said. And so we will get into the full write-up on all of these guys that the Giants netted for Tyler Rogers in just a minute. We'll also get into what comes next. Like, is a full fire sale in their future given how poorly they've played here? Is that the right move? If so, who would go? And what kind of moves would you expect in the next less than 24 hours as the trade deadline approaches? So we'll get into the Tyler Rogers return momentarily. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Game Time. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? I do. The app shows you and me a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for concerts and shows with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time, the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, here we go. We're going to get into the return for Tyler Rogers. Kind of a shocking trade, but also not so much, given how poorly the Giants have played at the worst possible time. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, you're not going to want to miss tomorrow's show, as we are going to record when the deadline passes. And I expect the Giants are not done. And it's going to be very interesting to see if they also make some moves that bring in some players with maybe some team control. Like, I wouldn't rule out like a Steven Kwan still, even though they're kind of selling. And actually, you could argue that the Giants aren't that much worse because they already had a strong bullpen. That was my case for trading Camilo Doval. Tyler Rogers is a free agent at the end of the year, and they bring in a guy who's already in a major league bullpen, and we'll get into who that is among this trio of players coming back to the Giants. And so the MLBTradeRumors.com write-up is pretty thorough, and so we're just going to read it. And it says, speaking of the Mets getting Rogers, to get the player they wanted, it feels like they have given up a lot. So this is a second source that indicates that the return seems hefty for a rental reliever. Well, he's good. Guess what? But anyway, still, people know he's good, and they're saying it was a good return for the Giants. So Tidwell, 24 years old, was a second-round pick of the Mets in 2022. Since then, he has generally been ranked as one of the club's top 10 prospects. His results since getting up to AAA haven't been astounding. He has a 5.05 ERA in 164 innings at the top minor league level. He's been a bit better there this year with a 4.10 ERA and 25.7% strikeout rate and 9.5% walk rate. Baseball America currently lists Tidwell as the Mets' number 10 prospect. They give him a 50 grade on the 20 to 80 scale and classify him as high risk. Their report notes that he'll need to improve his control to become a back-end starter. There's a typo there. A month ago, Fangraphs ranked him number 7 in the Mets system, but with a 45-plus grade, noting that he could develop into a mid-rotation guy. So that alone would be a great outcome, a mid-rotation starter, but with some reliever risk thanks to his control issues and high-effort delivery. Okay, getting to Gilbert, Drew Gilbert, 24 years old, first-round pick of the Astros in 2022, but came to the Mets in the August 2023 trade, which sent Justin Verlander back to Houston. So that's super interesting. Gilbert's stock has dipped a bit since that trade. He missed a decent chunk of 2024 due to a hamstring injury and slashed 205, 313, 371 when he was on the field. This year he has been better with a 246 average, 349 on base, and 435 slash line, 105 weighted runs created plus. In his AAA action, Baseball America ranks him as the number 14 prospect in the Mets system, also with a 50 grade and high risk. Fangraphs puts him at number 10 with a 45 grade. Fangraphs notes he mostly does damage against fastballs but struggles against spin. He can play all 3 outfield spots, but evaluators generally think it's a bit of a stretch to have him in center. Fangraphs describes him as a low variance 4th outfielder. He is going to be eligible for the Rule 5 draft in December, meaning he'll need to be added to the 40-man before then. So a little bit of it, Baseball America says high risk and Fangraphs says low variance, and so those are different takes. But the key thing to note here is that you're getting guys with years of team control for what the Mets are getting, which is 2 months of a reliever. And the Giants already have, Randy Rodriguez, Camilo Doval, and Ryan Walker as just a really good back end of the bullpen anyway. And so I love Tyler Rogers, but they could afford to make this move from, especially if you're like out of contention, it makes a lot of sense. And they took advantage and got a good return here. So in terms of Buttó, MLB Trade Rumors writes, Buttó can plug directly into the San Francisco bullpen to replace Rogers. He's thrown 167 big league innings with a 3.45 ERA, 23.5% strikeout rate, 12.2% walk rate, which is pretty high, and 43.9% ground ball rate, which is roughly average. Everything's a little bit average, except the walk rate is above average, like worse than average. Buttó is out of options, and some of this year's trend lines aren't good. His strikeout rate was 26.9% last year, but has dipped to just 20.7% this season. While his walk rate has stayed high at 11.1%, perhaps he was going to get squeezed off the Mets roster as part of their deadline moves regardless, though it might come across as a lot to give up for a soft-tossing rental. That's such a... I'm sorry, but who cares if he's soft-tossing or not? Like, the results are elite, okay? The Mets may not have had Gilbert or Buttó in their long-term plans. As mentioned, Gilbert was going to need a 40-man spot in a few months' time. If the Mets view him as a future quad A outfielder, not an everyday regular, perhaps they could find another use for that. Who cares? This is the Mets' perspective. And then they go on to say, for the Giants, there's undoubtedly a lot to like in this haul. Oh, I lost my spot. Uno momento, por favor. They hovered in the playoff race for a lot of the year, but have been cold lately and are now 5 games back, now 6, of a playoff spot. It was reported earlier that they would be listening to offers on their relievers. Rogers, as mentioned, is a 34-year-old impending free agent. The Giants have swapped him out for Buttó. That makes their bullpen worse today, but Rogers was on his way out the door. Not necessarily. They could re-sign him, but they could still now re-sign him. Anyway, and perhaps they can find a way to get Buttó back on track. With Tidwell, they add some immediate rotation depth, something which has been an issue this year. They mentioned Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, but questions after that, flipping Kyle Harrison and Jordan Hicks to the Red Sox in the Devers deal, Justin Verlander, impending free agent, Roop, injured, Birdsong, struggling, and they'll likely look for more pitching in the offseason, but Tidwell can jump into that depth mix alongside guys like Roop, Birdsong, Trevor McDonald, Mason Black, and others. And then in terms of Gilbert, the outfielder, MLB Trade Rumors writes, Gilbert gives them some extra outfield depth. They will go into 2026 with Elliot Ramos and Jung-Hoo Lee in 2 spots, but Mike Yastrzemski is an impending free agent. Guys like Luis Matos, Wade Meckler, Grant McCray, Marco Luciano, and Daniel Johnson are on the 40-man. Assuming Gilbert gets a roster spot this fall, he'll jump into that mix. So, I just read a lot there, but the general consensus I wanted to get across was that this is considered by many. I don't watch these. I've never seen any of these players play, but there's a write-up on Fangraphs where I definitely want to read. It came out kind of while I was in the middle of recording this. So, I'm interested to read what Fangraphs has to say, and I'll pass it along. The final line is quote, "This is a fine pickup for the Giants. All 3 either can be useful major leaguers or already are, but the likelihood is that there is not a good starting pitcher or a high leverage reliever or an above average starting position player in this package, even if the name value says otherwise." So I'm interested to read what they have to say. But the fact is, if you're 6 games back and you have a reliever who is an impending free agent, you're not going to get the top prospect in all of baseball. It's just you're limited to some extent to what you're going to get. And that being said, the Giants, there's a quote in here I see. It says, if the Giants make the playoffs, which is still not out of the realm of possibility, I see no reason why Buttó wouldn't pitch then as well. So it's a good point. Like, he slots right into the bullpen, and so you get a little bit worse, but Buttó is 27 years old, and it's got a career 3.45 ERA. This year it's 3.64. Fielding independent pitching, 3.37. Expected ERA is 4.27, but still, like, a lot of the numbers are encouraging, and actually his ground ball rate is way up this year at 51.5%, way higher than that career average they mentioned on MLB Trade Rumors in that little write-up. So I don't know. I think, like, if you look at the projections, Steamer has Buttó with a 3.81 ERA. Zips has Buttó rest of season with a 3.47 ERA. ATC has a 3.76 ERA. Oopsie has Buttó with a 3.56 ERA. So you could be getting a pretty good reliever here, and that's just one of several pieces, and he's not a free agent until after the 2030 season, and he's not arbitration eligible until after the 2026 season. So yeah, I mean, I think it's sad to see, but it's understandable, and I think it was a pretty strong return. And so the question is, what should the Giants do now? Are they full-blown sellers? Should they be? Should they not be? I will give my opinion, which is, it's hard to like form one, but the reality is they have put themselves in a bad position at this time. Maybe I want to say like the worst time, but maybe it ends up being a blessing in disguise. We'll get into what I mean in just a minute, and before we do, today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one is a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the golf course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I remember being on the golf course one time, hitting a crazy shot, little chip shot, like rolled with a steep green, went on the green, like rolled down and went in the cup. It was absolutely unbelievable. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape, ginger, lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th. One order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription offers. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Okay, here we go. We're going to get into what I think the Giants should do now. It's like less than 24 hours to the trade deadline, and so it's kind of time to constantly refresh Twitter. It's that time of year. And the Giants are an interesting team because they were looking like buyers for the whole first half until right about now. And so that's kind of a crazy plot twist. And I'm just trying to verify. It looks like, yes, the 2025 MLB trade deadline is at 3 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. And so by the time you're listening to this, I mean, by the time I'm recording, I'm sorry I had a prior commitment. I wasn't able to record until tonight, but you know, we're way less than 24 hours to go until the trade deadline. And what should the Giants do? So as I wrote on Twitter, Giants have lost 10 of 12 and now trail the Padres by 6 games for the final wildcard spot. With Tyler Rogers already dealt, they should seriously consider offers for Robbie Ray, a free agent after 2026, and anyone who's on an expiring deal or out of options and not in the plans for 2026. So out of options, not in the plans, guys, could be like a Marco Luciano, a Luis Matos. And this is where it gets a little interesting. Like, you could buy with some of these players in addition to selling them, if that makes any sense. And when it comes to a guy like Robbie Ray, you would be full on waving the white towel on the season, I think, because you're already in a tough position and you would be trading your second best pitcher outside of Logan Webb. And so, man, Logan Webb had 12 strikeouts today against the Pirates and the Giants didn't win. That's crazy. I'm reading a quote from, I think it's Logan Webb, Shayna Rubin, courtesy of Shayna Rubin. Logan Webb said, "It doesn't change our expectations of ourselves. You also understand that we put the front office in a tough spot too, and they have to look at the future and the now." So it's true. And they've done this year after year, and it's frustrating. But in my opinion, the Giants should definitely listen on anybody, really, especially, like I said, guys who are kind of short term. So they don't have any like great rental players. They're true rentals, meaning guys who are free agents at the end of the year, include Justin Verlander, Wilmer Flores, Tom Murphy. Remember him? They're paying him, and Mike Yastrzemski. So guys with only 2 years left of team control, it's just Robbie Ray. So that means he'll finish out this year, and then he's signed for next year, and he's going to be 34 next year, and he's pitching so well. Like, you could kind of, there are a lot of starting pitchers out there, but Robbie Ray would be near the top of many contenders' lists with a 2.93 ERA, a 25.5% strikeout rate, 3.32 expected ERA, fielding independent pitching a bit high at 3.76, but nonetheless, I mean, it's worth considering. And I did see there were some replies to my tweet, like, that return would have to be massive because if you trade Robbie Ray, it would be really hard to field a competitive rotation in 2026. But right now, like, they did everything they could to field a competitive team, and it wasn't good enough as it is. At least it hasn't been yet. It was for a while, but I mean, really, they had a good start, and then they've played subpar baseball ever since, like a good first couple weeks, and that's it. Otherwise, it's been subpar. So I think you have to listen. And then, so that's Robbie Ray. But then there is also, I don't know, is there any way to trade Verlander? Is it even worth it? You would probably just have to pay down the entire contract and then get nothing in return. Wilmer Flores is a guy who could definitely sneakily get some value in return. It's kind of like a Marco Scutaro to a team, I would think. You know, he is a clutch player that if I'm a playoff team, I would want this guy on my team. Like, the Mets are being aggressive. They wanted Wilmer Flores in the deal that ultimately netted them Darren Ruff several years ago. It's a different front office now, but to have a guy like Flores on your bench, if you're a contender, is super valuable, I think. And then I would listen on Camilo Doval, even though trading Tyler Rogers, I think, makes it less likely that you trade a Camilo Doval. The reason I say Doval is because out of Ryan Walker, Doval, and Randy Rodriguez, I think Doval is probably the most, what's the word? Like, he's shaky at times, and so maybe there's the most risk. Whereas Walker has had a kind of weird season, but there's another big factor here, which is that Doval is a free agent after the 2027 season. So this year plus 2 more years, whereas Walker isn't a free agent until after the 2029 season. So that's 2 extra years. And for Randy Rodriguez, he's not a free agent until after 2030. So you're getting 5 extra years plus this year for Randy Rodriguez. So I don't see the Giants moving Walker or Randy Rodriguez, but I could see Camilo Doval, and that would be like a clear they're selling sign. So we'll see. I do still think it's possible. Like, they didn't get dramatically worse just by trading Tyler Rogers. And they did get a guy who slots right into the bullpen probably in José Buttó. So it's possible still, like you could trade a Doval. I've mentioned Casey Schmidt as a dark horse kind of trade candidate. And you could try to go out and get a Steven Kwan, for example. And I don't know exactly what it would take, but there's a lot of players out there. And so I don't see Buster Posey per se like just throwing in the white towel completely, but it is something that they should definitely consider listening on not every player. Like you're not listening on Logan Webb. I don't know. I'd listen on some of the guys with big contracts. Probably not though. Maybe like I'd listen on a Jung-Hoo Lee. I'd listen on a Devers. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it hasn't been a great start here for Devers, but so that's a little insane of me to say. But I don't know. I'm just saying, like, be open to anything and everything. Obviously, there's some guys who are just not going anywhere, like Webb. But if you're, like I said, if you're getting close to the end of your contract, or if you're out of options going into next year and not really in the plans, like Luciano, maybe Matos, it's trading season by 3 p.m. tomorrow Pacific time. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. And today, for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. And please, if you're not following me there, but you're a fan of the show, check me out there. I'm going to do it tonight. Reactivate my Blue Sky account. I closed it. So if you're not on Twitter, but you are on Blue Sky, please look for me there as well. And Friday is my last day hosting this show. So if you want to continue to follow me and my work, at Ben Kaspick on Twitter is where to find out what I'm doing. And then also on Blue Sky, we'll set that up. Anyway, thanks again for listening today. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. It is the trade deadline. We're going to wait till after the deadline to do our episode. You are now Locked On Giants.